Music 292, Week 4, Part 1, Understanding Mode Mixture. Welcome to Week 4. This week I'm going to split the content into two videos. The first is going to explain the concept of mode mixture, and the second video is going to give you analytical examples to see how this works in real music. Let's get started. First, what is mode mixture? Mode mixture occurs when notes or chords from the parallel key are used in the current key. If you're not familiar with the term parallel key, it's referring to the key that has the same tonic note, but which changes the mode. So for example, if I started in C major, the parallel key would be C minor. If I was in G minor, the parallel key would be G major. So parallel keeps the same tonic, but switches major to minor and vice versa. Probably the easiest way to talk you through this is to compare two parallel keys. On the screen, I'm currently displaying C major and C minor, which share the same tonic note, C. You'll see in comparing these two scales to one another that there's three notes that are different between the two scales: scale degree 3, scale degree 6, and scale degree 7. So these are essentially the notes that are going to get modified in mode mixture. If we're starting in the key of C major, what we're going to do is use the notes E flat instead of E natural, A flat instead of A natural, and B flat instead of B natural. If we were starting our piece in the minor key, then we would borrow from the parallel major key. We would use E natural instead of E flat, A natural instead of A flat, and B natural instead of B flat. So to summarize, it's a borrowing from the parallel key. If you're in minor, you're going to borrow from the major key. If you're in major, you're going to borrow from the minor key. It turns out we actually use mode mixture already on a fairly regular basis. The raised leading tone that we use in the minor key is actually an example of mode mixture from the parallel major key. So think of it in C minor. If you're in the key of C minor, your raised leading tone means you're going to use B natural rather than B flat. That B natural is actually a borrowing from C major, the parallel major key. Similarly, it means that when you're using the 5 chord or the 7 chord in a minor key and you're raising the leading tone, those are chords that are borrowed from the parallel major key. I'm not going to talk a huge amount in this class about harmonic minor versus melodic minor versus natural minor, simply because they're kind of interchangeable and they're kind of the same thing when it comes to composing and analysis. They're basically just variations of the exact same scale. But for the purposes of talking about mode mixture, we can think of both the raised scale degree 7 and the raised scale degree 6, if we're talking about melodic minor, as being examples of that mode mixture borrowing. So when you're composing, how do you create mode mixture? Well, there's a few very simple steps to follow. Your basic premise is that you're going to be altering scale degrees 3, 6, and 7 by one semitone. If you're starting your whole piece in the major key, when you do mode mixture, you're going to lower those scale degrees by a semitone. If you're starting your whole piece in a minor key, you're going to take scale degrees 3, 6, and 7, and you're going to raise those notes a semitone. So basically, if you're starting in major, you want to lower those notes to make it sound more like minor. And if you're starting in minor, you want to raise those notes to make it sound more like major. Let's start by looking at an example that starts in the major key. Let's have a listen. So in a major key, we're going to lower scale degrees 3, 6, and 7. And the effect of that is that it's going to create something that resembles the parallel minor scale. When we're mode mixturing, it's completely our choice as composers where we choose to do it. There's going to be different effects depending on what scale degree that you're situated on, or depending on the harmonic function that you're working with. But ultimately, mode mixture doesn't change the harmonic function. So if I take a tonic chord, for example, and I mode mixture it, it's still a tonic chord. That aspect doesn't change. It still reinforces the key because it still has the emphasis on that tonic note. If you're mode mixturing on subdominant, it's the same thing. You're going to change the chord quality, but the chord will still act as a connecting chord, so it's still going to have that subdominant function. Dominant is where things are a little bit different and get a little bit complex. In this regard, if you mode mixture a dominant chord in a minor key, like we already discussed, you're just using the raised leading tone. But the other way around, if you're in a major key and you mode mixture, then you're going to weaken the dominant function because there's no longer a note that's a semitone away from the tonic to create the tension that we expect in dominant function. As a result, be aware that you shouldn't use this at the dominant of cadences, because you need that tension to actually create the sense of cadence. So you can mode mixture on dominance like earlier in the piece, say for example you're doing a prolongation, but you really shouldn't do it at the cadential moment. I'm not going to go into that too much today in this lesson, but I am going to talk about that effect on dominant function probably starting around weeks 5 and 6 when we talk about pop music in particular, and the way that they use modes. So for now, just keep in mind that as a composer, you can choose any tonic or subdominant location to do a mode mixture. And if you're doing mode mixture on dominance, you should probably avoid it at cadences if you're starting in a major key and going to minor. All right, let's get back to our example. In this example, I'm going to choose a small number of chords to modify, because if I change too many chords, it can make the key a little bit too ambiguous. I'm going to do mode mixture on the 4 chord, and I'm also going to do it on the 6 chord. Your next step in creating mode mixture is that you're going to identify whether any of these selected chords contain scale degrees 3, 6, or 7, because these are the notes that are going to be impacted by mode mixture. You're going to start by looking for these notes. I've just gone ahead and I've circled them on the score for you. These are the notes that are going to be lowered by semitone in mode mixture starting in C major. In borrowing from the parallel key of C minor, A is going to become A flat, E is going to become E flat. Another way of conceptualizing this change is to essentially think of it as using the key signature of the parallel key on these chords. So the parallel key is going to be C minor, which we know has a 3-flat key signature, B flat, E flat, A flat. We should then add those flats if they apply within each of our chosen chords. After you adjust the accidentals of these pitches, you're then going to need to adjust the Roman numeral representations, because the chord qualities are going to change based on how you've modified your accidentals. For example, our 4 chord started as a major chord in C major, but when we added our A flat to it, it became a minor chord because we're changing our major third interval into a minor third. We need to show that in our Roman numerals, so we need to write this now as lowercase 4. Similarly, our 6th chord started out as a minor chord in the original key, but after we add the A flat and the E flat, it now becomes a major quality chord. So we write the Roman numerals uppercase to reflect this change. You're also going to put a flat beside the Roman numeral to show that you've altered the root of the chord. It turns out that you may also need to adjust the voicing to fix any voice leading errors that result. I've switched a few voices around here compared to my C major version, because in adding that A flat, I potentially created an augmented second problem between my scale degree 6 and my scale degree 7. So I wanted to be sure to avoid that. Here's a side-by-side comparison that you can take a look at both versions. Let's listen to both. Let's now do a similar mode mixture process, but we're going to start in a minor key so that we can get more practice with that. Once again, we're going to borrow notes from the parallel key. In this case, it's going to be G major. It eliminates the 2 flats from the key signature, and it adds on an F sharp. However, another way of thinking about this is to alter scale degrees 3, 6, and 7. You're going to notice me saying that a lot in this unit. And we're going to alter those notes by 1 semitone. In this case, because we're starting in a minor key and we're going to a major key, we're going to raise that 1 semitone. So here's my original progression. Let's have a listen. Like I pointed out previously, we actually already have 2 mode mixtures here. They exist because of the raised leading tone. The 7 chord and the 5 chord use the raised leading tone and are therefore already mode mixtures. I will point out, however, that for the sake of homework exercises, if I ask you to use a mode mixture, I'm going to take that to mean a mode mixture that's extra to the normal raised leading tone. The normal raised leading tone is such a standard compositional process in classical style music that even though it technically is mode mixture, we don't really think of it as mode mixture. So just to repeat that, if I say use a mode mixture on an assignment, it means use an extra one that's not the raised leading tone. All right, so let's do our process. Our first step is to choose a chord to mode mixture. Any chord is technically possible, although 7 and 5 already have the raised leading tones, so they're already mode mixture. We're going to avoid those for the time being. Let's choose the 4 chord. At this point, Either think of it as using the accidentals of G major, so I would cancel out the key signature accidentals and add an F sharp, or I can think of it using the scale degree way. I can see if my chord contains scale degrees 3, 6, or 7. And in this case, raise those notes a semitone according to our rule. In this particular case, the C is scale degree 4 in G minor. That doesn't change. The E flat is scale degree 6 in G minor, so that does need to change. We're going to add an accidental to raise that note. It starts as an E flat based on the key signature in minor, so we're going to raise that a semitone by making it natural. And then finally, our G is scale degree 1, so it doesn't need any change. It's not affected by our raised scale degree 3, 6, 7 rule. So here's our result. Let's have a listen. Let's do another one. This time I'm going to choose the tonic chord at the very ending of this piece. We're going to follow the exact same rules. I'm going to choose my chord, then look at my chord and see whether it contains scale degrees 3, 6, or 7, and then adjust accordingly. I can map out some of these things ahead of time to help me out. In G minor, scale degree 3 is going to be B flat, scale degree 6 is going to be E flat, and scale degree 7 is going to be F. It can be helpful just to have this information written on the side of your page to help you track through this process. To make this chord in a mode mixture, I'm going to see if any of these notes are affected. And it turns out that yes, there is one of these notes in the chord. There was a B flat in my original 1 chord, so that note is going to get adjusted, become natural to create the mode mixture. Notice again that I changed the Roman numeral. This is no longer a minor chord now that I've raised this to be B natural. It's now a major chord. You might have actually already learned this concept last year, or you might have learned it in Royal Conservatory, because this is a special kind of mode mixture which is called a tierce de Picardy, or Picardy third. A tierce de Picardy is the use of mode mixture in a minor key on the tonic chord at the very ending of your phrase or your piece. It creates a much brighter sound, and as a result it sounds a lot more conclusive because of its brightness and because of its resemblance to the major key. All right, let's do one more example. You now know your steps. You're going to choose a chord, then alter your scale degrees. I'm going to choose our 6th chord here. Our scale degrees are on the side for reference. We can see that this chord originally contains B flat and E flat, so I'll need to raise those notes a semitone to make this into mode mixture. Here's what it's going to look like. Now there's a bit of an issue here. First of all, we need to make sure that we adjust the Roman numeral accordingly. Like I mentioned earlier, if the root of the chord is changed, we need an extra symbol to indicate this that goes in front of your Roman numeral. That's why I have the sharp beside my 6th chord. This tells me that I've raised the root of the chord a semitone compared to where it would normally sit in this key. But second, although we've technically done this process correctly, we encounter another problem here. We have 4 chords in a row that are now all mode mixture. This section will therefore sound like a modulation, since mixture is not just confined to a small area. It actually consists of over half the progression at this point. There comes a point where if you use too many mode mixtures in a row, your brain is just going to switch to hearing this thing in the parallel key. So we need to be really careful about how frequently we use these mode mixtures. You want to be pretty sparing with them. Another problem you can sometimes encounter is that sometimes you go to mode mixture, but the parallel key doesn't actually exist. To demonstrate this concept, I've taken the progression we've just worked on and I put it into G sharp minor to start. In G sharp minor, if we want to think of borrowing chords from the parallel key, well, technically the parallel key would be G sharp major, but G sharp major doesn't actually exist in real life. It doesn't really have a valid key signature. I'm not going to take this thing and enharmonically rewrite it as A flat major. That would get super confusing. It's generally pretty confusing if we mix sharps and flats in the same key area, apart from the raised leading tone. It's confusing for the musician reading it, and it's confusing for anybody who's trying to figure out scale degree within the context of keys. So just don't do that. I could figure out the scale by measuring the tones and semitones, and if I did that, we would get the notes G sharp, A sharp, B sharp, C sharp, D sharp, E sharp, F double sharp, and G sharp. But that's still kind of a cumbersome way of thinking about this whole thing. It's actually much easier in this situation if we remember our rule about altering scale degrees. If we're starting in a minor key, we're simply going to raise scale degrees 3, 6, and 7 to create that mode mixture alteration. So that focuses more on adjusting individual notes And it's a lot easier than trying to figure out these parallel keys in situations where the parallel key doesn't exist. So say, for example, I wanted a mode mixture on my 4 chord here. I'll see whether my 4 chord contains scale degrees 3, 6, or 7. Yes, turns out that it does. The E is scale degree 6. What I'll do next is to raise that note a semitone. So because it starts as an E natural based on our key signature, raising that will make it into an E sharp. This is what my mode mixture is going to look like. And once again, I've adjusted the Roman numeral to show that this is now a major chord. That's your explanation for how to build mode mixture. This information is also doubled up in the course pack and in your textbook from last year, so if you do want some extra review, that's a good place to start. In our next video, we're going to talk about practical applications of mode mixture in real music, and we're going to particularly focus on analysis. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video.